I'm Kaushik, Secretary of the Linguistics Club, and in this video I'll be talking about writing systems. If you're learning a new language, you might have to learn how to read and write in a new writing system or script. You're probably familiar with the Latin alphabet that I'm using right now, but there are many more systems in use all around the world, and they're all different and unique. In this video I'll go over the main types of writing system, and then I'll give you a taste of just how different writing systems can be. The first type I'll be looking at is logographic systems. In systems like these, each letter or glyph represents a word or a morpheme. Morphemes are essentially units of meaning in a language that can sometimes be words, but not always. For example, in English, ing is a morpheme because it conveys a specific meaning when added to a verb, even though it isn't a word by itself. Anyway, as I said before, glyphs represent morphemes, which you can see in these examples. The most well-known logographic system used today would probably be Chinese characters. Another example is ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. As you can see in the image on the left, the Egyptian hieroglyphs on the first row are essentially pictures of what they represent. This is how logographies are created. People started by just drawing out what they wanted to write, and later on those drawings became writing. The Chinese characters also started out like pictures, but as you can see in the second row, they became more abstract and easier to write. Another characteristic of logographic systems is that if you're learning one, you'll have to remember lots of different symbols, as shown on the image on the right. In Chinese, you'll end up knowing at least a few thousand characters if you become a fluent speaker and reader. If you're learning a language that uses logographs, you'll need a way to remember all of them. The next type of writing system is the syllabary, where each glyph represents a syllable, usually a consonant and then a vowel. Languages that use syllabaries include Japanese and Cherokee. In fact, Japanese uses two syllabaries for different purposes, as shown on the right, as well as a version of Chinese characters. These syllable symbols can come from a variety of places. For example, Japan's two syllabaries come from Chinese characters simplified over time, while the Cherokee syllabary was invented in 1821. Syllabaries tend to have fewer symbols than logographic systems, but they still might seem daunting to someone who hasn't learned anything like them before. However, you can still find a way to remember all the symbols, so don't give up. Abogidas are writing systems where glyphs represent consonants, and those symbols are then modified with little marks that represent the vowels. Two of the most well-known abogidas are Devanagari, which is used for many languages, including Hindi, and Ge'ez, which is used for a few languages around Ethiopia. As you can see on the left image, every character in the second and fourth rows has the same symbol written in black, which represents the consonant K, and then some markings in red, which represent the other sounds that follow that K. An abogida will probably be easier to learn than a syllabary or a logography, but you'll still need to remember lots of new symbols. Abjads are somewhat similar to abogidas. In an abjad, you write down consonants, but vowels are optional. Arabic and Hebrew both use abjads, although technically the Arabic and Hebrew writing systems are considered impure abjads, because some longer and more important vowels are required to be written down. Those vowels can be written using consonants that sound like those vowels. For example, in Arabic, if you really need to indicate the vowel U, you write it with the letter W, because W and U sound similar. Another cool thing about Arabic and Hebrew is that they're written right to left, which I'll discuss in more detail later. Also, sometimes letters are written differently, depending on where they are in a word. A specific letter in Arabic can be written in different ways, depending on whether it's at the beginning, middle, or end of a word, or if it's on its own. And finally, we have alphabets, which you're probably familiar with. In an alphabet, glyphs represent consonants and vowels. Ideally, every letter represents one sound, but there are many exceptions to this rule, especially in languages like English. The alphabets include the Latin alphabet, which I'm using right now, as well as the Cyrillic alphabet used for many languages in Eurasia, including Russian, and the Greek alphabet. Featural writing systems aren't that common, and they're usually invented by a person or group of people because writing systems don't tend to evolve this way. In a featural system, symbols don't just represent sounds, they also show how those sounds are pronounced. The Korean writing system, Hangul, is a good example of this. On the image on the right, we can see that the symbol for G is meant to be a simplified diagram of where to put your tongue in your mouth to pronounce the sound G or K. It's the same thing with N. Also, Hangul is especially remarkable because of the way it creates syllable blocks out of individual sound symbols, which is shown on the left image. Even though I've given you a few types of writing system, keep in mind that every script is unique and has its own quirks that make it special. There's so much to learn about writing systems, and I'm barely scratching the surface with this video. Let's look at some of the other things that make scripts special. English and the majority of writing systems are read left to right. But as I said before, Arabic and Hebrew are written right to left, although this is less common. Even less common are scripts that are read downward, like vertical Chinese and Japanese text, as well as Mongolian. Other scripts are written in all kinds of different ways. There's also spelling. As I've already said, ideally one letter represents one sound or group of sounds all the time. However, in English, that's not the case at all. Languages change over time, and writing systems need to change as well in order to fit the language. However, sometimes the writing doesn't change as quickly as the language does, leading to discrepancies. Here we can see that the English word night has 3 silent letters. This is because at the time when the spelling of the word night was decided upon, English speakers still pronounced the K and the GH. In fact, in German and Dutch they still pronounce them. It's not just English that has these weird spellings. For example, spelling in Tibetan is notoriously weird because it hasn't really changed since the early 9th century. Tibetan is also a good example of an abugida that's a little more complicated than what I've discussed, so if you want to get a taste of a more complex writing system, then Google the Tibetan script. I've shown you many ways in which scripts can be different from what you're used to, but don't be afraid. Learning a writing system isn't as hard as it might seem. Here are some tips to make your journey a little bit easier. Don't overwhelm yourself. Don't force yourself to learn all the symbols in a script in one sitting. Instead, learn a few symbols at a time so that you'll slowly become better at using the new writing system. Also, write down the glyphs with a pencil or a pen to help you remember them better. Find mnemonics or memory devices to use. If there's an alphabet song or something similar for your language, then use it to learn the alphabet quicker. Use visual aids like pictures and shapes to help learn glyphs. Compare the new script to scripts you already know. For example, Cyrillic and Greek share a lot of letters with the Latin alphabet, which makes learning them just a little bit easier. Finally, don't be afraid to do a lot of Google searching to find resources, mnemonics, and other types of help for your specific language. There's a lot of good advice online that comes from people with much more experience than you or I will ever have. So, if you learn the writing system for your language, you'll be able to read signs, newspapers, and even books in a new language. Hopefully, after some time, you'll be just like a native speaker. Also, being literate can make it easier to learn the language itself as well as communicate with native speakers online. So yeah, that's it. If you want to learn a language that doesn't use the Latin alphabet, then have fun learning a new writing system, and thanks for watching.